Hey guys, tonight we step away from the noisy modern world and drift into the strange, bewildering shadows of ancient history, where forgotten cities vanish beneath rivers, wooden birds may have dreamed of flight, and stone blocks the size of houses somehow perched on mountaintops without cranes or wheels. These aren't fairy tales, they're real puzzles carved into the timeline of humanity, and scholars are still arguing about them today. So, before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy wandering through history's mysteries with me. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. It's always incredible to see this little community stretching from one side of the world to the other, meeting together here in the quiet. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a blanket or let that soft background hum carry you, and let's ease into tonight's journey. We'll begin with a Carthaginian admiral who may have pushed his oared ships all the way to volcanic mountains on the Gulf of Guinea, long before Europeans dreamed of such voyages. Then we'll slip into the Mesopotamian plain, where the world's first empire built a capital city so famous that every later dynasty praised it, but no one can find it today. From there we'll march south with a Roman commander who claimed to reach a lake filled with hippos and crocodiles, and uncover how China invented a doctrine that could topple emperors by blaming them for bad weather. 15 mysteries. 15 puzzles. Some carved in stone, some whispered in legend, some locked in scripts nobody alive can read. Tonight, we open them together. Hanno the Navigator and the Carthaginian push into the Atlantic. In the 5th century BCE, when Carthage was the restless nerve center of Western Mediterranean commerce, its ruling council approved a voyage that sounded like audacity, made real. They chose Hanno, commander, colonist, careful observer, to take a fleet through the Pillars of Heracles, the Strait of Gibraltar, and into waters that Phoenician mariners had long known but rarely chronicled. Hanno's own terse ship's log, preserved through a Greek translation centuries later, does not read like boastful fiction. It reads like work, founding stations, replenishing water, watching the sky for wind, noting animals none of his countrymen had seen alive. He sailed with a large convoy, the log claiming an impossible 30,000 people, almost certainly an exaggeration, but still indicating a massive undertaking. The colonists were left mainly along today's Moroccan Atlantic, seed points of Carthaginian presence, such as Thymiaterion and other sites whose exact positions remain debated. The vagueness is not a flaw, it's the logic of a state that guarded commercial secrets. If enemies ever seized the log, they would not seize the locations. From those new harbors, the fleet went farther. Hanno remarks on a lagoon thronged with wildlife and elephants grazing among marsh reeds, an ecological memory of North Africa that jars modern readers used to thinking of endless desert. He lists more outposts: Karakon, Gita, Accra, Melita, Arambe, names that whisper where archaeology has found traces of Punic contact along the Moroccan shore. Then the narrative leaves the mapped world. The fleet reaches a great river, likely the Draa, where cattle-herding peoples greeted the Carthaginians amiably. Hanno lingered long enough to hire interpreters, human tools as valuable as rope and timber, then pushed on. Kern, an island post he said lay opposite Carthage by sailing reckoning, became a hinge. Scholars have placed it from western Sahara down to the Bay of Arguin off Mauritania. Whatever its exact spot, it was a staging edge between the known and the unknown. South of Kurna, the ocean's warm pulse and prevailing trades carried Hanno into ecosystems that startled northern eyes: crocodiles on a broad river and hippopotamuses wallowing in numbers that made the water itself seem alive. For Greeks and Carthaginians of that age, hippos were known from texts and Egyptian art, not from memory. Hanno's notice of them reads like discovery turned into evidence. We truly came this far. He writes of an eerie night at an island in a bay within a bay, where the crew heard drums, cymbals, flutes, and voices from the mainland, human presence made strange by distance and fear. He describes a coast that seemed to burn, heat so fierce sailors would not go ashore, and finally a towering mountain sending fire into the sky. No volcano along the Atlantic rim fits better than Mount Cameroon, which does send lava toward the sea during some eruptions. If that identification is right, Hanno's ships reached the Gulf of Guinea, an extraordinary range for ancient oared galleys, and square-rigged craft. Then, the most famous passage, the Gorillae, at Sei, a southern bay, perhaps near the Gabon estuary. The men tried to capture hairy, human-like creatures. The adult males pelted the sailors with stones from high ground and vanished. 3 females were caught, killed when they resisted and skinned. Hanno says he brought those hides home to Carthage, where they were displayed in the temple of Tanit for generations. The Greek transliteration gorillae became the 19th century scientific name gorilla, though modern readers should keep the ambiguity alive. The behaviors described could also match chimpanzees, especially the stone-throwing and group tactics. Either way, the account's zoological specificity lends weight to a journey far into tropical Africa. The log ends because supplies run thin. The turn north was not romance. It was seamanship. Getting home meant fighting the Canary Current and trade winds that favor southbound voyages. Without a centerline rudder, and with square sails happiest on following winds, the return would have been grueling, hugging coasts, waiting out calms, rowing for hours with little headway, slipping into Kern, then the Moroccan stations, and finally beyond the pillars to the well-sailed blue of the Mediterranean. Later, authors embroidered the tale, even claiming Hanno rounded Africa, or made implausible detours. Strip those away, and what remains is robust, a Punic state extending its trade radius, planting fuel stations of people and pottery, and recording enough natural detail. Elephants in Moroccan marshes, hippos in West African rivers, a volcano that matches Mount Cameroon, to convince modern historians that a Carthaginian prowsman indeed carved his wake down the Atlantic coast. Hanno's voyage is less a myth than a ledger with salt on it, a list of places touched, things seen, deals made, and a line at the bottom, no more provisions, that says everything about how far they had gone. The lost capital of the First Empire, where was Akkad? 2.5 millennia before Rome's emperors, and centuries before Babylon's apex. A cupbearer turned conqueror named Sargon fashioned an idea that would not die, a state larger than any city's walls could hold. Around 2340 BCE he won, then won again, then organized what he had won. The dynasts we call Akkadian ruled a realm stretching across the Tigris-Euphrates lowlands and into the hills and trade routes beyond. At its heart stood a capital whose fame darkened every later text that uttered it, Akkad. We can quote, praise and curse it, but we cannot point to it on a map. The name pervades clay tablets, administrative orders, royal boasts, hymns to Ishtar, the war and love goddess who became the dynasty's patron. Under Sargon and then his grandson Naram-Sin, who was proclaimed a living god after crushing a revolt, Akkadian language and iconography displaced Sumerian traditions in official life. A standing army emerges in the record, perhaps 5,000 strong in regular service. Governors appointed from the center oversee old Sumerian cities. Merchants move goods whose origins reach the known world's ends. The bronze head, long identified as Sargon, with its unsettling realism, implies not just power but a visual politics, a king who could be recognized. Then the arc breaks. After Naram-Sin, the king list phrase, naming aspirants stacked like storm clouds. Explanations compete and may all be partly true. Drought long enough to bite, pressure from mobile groups at the margins, and the fatigue of maintaining an imperial order built fast. By about 2150 BCE, central authority splintered, and the memory machine switched on. Later, Babylonians and Assyrians revered Akkad's monarchs as models, preserving inscriptions and parading booty like Naram-Sin's victory stele to distant cities as heirlooms. Golden ages glow brightest after they're gone. So why don't we have the city? The Tigris and Euphrates are not fixed lines. They wander, split, drown, and abandon banks over centuries. Silt erases, floods tear layers apart, channels shift and take telltale artifacts with them. The modern search is not guesswork so much as triangulation from old itineraries. One tradition places Akkad along the route between Sippar on the Euphrates and Eshnunna on the Diyala, pointing to the plain north of present-day Baghdad. Another cluster of clues drags the pin farther north toward the Adhaim, Adam River's confluence. The fragment of a monumental Akkadian statue base reported in the 19th century near Qadisiyah Temps. Such a piece usually belongs to a place that mattered. But movable prestige goods are exactly that, movable. Without a clear archaeological context, a single find is a hint, not a key. Complicating everything is modernity itself. The suspected zones now lie amid one of humanity's densest developed corridors, layered with suburbs, roads, pipes, and interruptions from decades of conflict. Even when survey instruments detect buried anomalies, excavation windows are small, and the water table can lurk high enough to turn a trench into a well. Meanwhile, the river's lateral migration across 4,000 years means that what was once a city block could now be meters below silts or gone entirely. The paradox of Akkad is that we know too much and too little. The administrative reach, the ideological turn toward Ishtar, the visual grammar of kingship, the imperial logistics, they are vivid in texts and artifacts preserved elsewhere. Yet the physical theater where those choices coalesced remains undelivered. That absence gnaws because cities answer questions only ruins can, street plans that expose how power met daily life, workshop quarters that show what was made and in what volumes, storage bays and waste pits that pin down diet and supply lines, inscriptions in secondary contexts that reveal how the city curated its own past. But absence also instructs. The rivers made Mesopotamia fertile. The rivers also take. They carry away the literal ground under claims of eternity. The lost capital of the First Empire is a warning that landscapes are archives, and archives can be rewritten by water. When Akkad is finally found, if the rivers have not erased beyond recall, it will not just confirm lines from old tablets, it will change the scale of our understanding. How an early empire organized its core, how it arranged its sacred and administrative rhythms, and how an idea called center manifested in mud brick and baked brick in gates and drains, in the daily traffic of an age that still speaks through the languages we learned from its clay. Romans to Lake Chad, Septimius Flaccus and the edge of their world picture. A column of men walking south from Leptis Magna's coast. Armor flashing, sand dulling the shine, camels laden with water, local guides reading the horizon the way sailors read swell. It is around the mid-1st century CE. The Roman Empire enjoys its height along the Mediterranean fringe of Africa. Tripolitan cities like Leptis and Sabratha grow rich on coastal agriculture, and the exchange of goods that ride Saharan caravans. Gold, ivory, exotic animals, skins. Yet the desert is not an empty moat. Oases stitch their own polities. The Garamantes in the Fezzan are not caricatures of chariot-riding bandits, but state builders with underground Foggara waterworks and a capital at Garama. They trade, they raid, and they complicate Roman assumptions. Earlier in 19 BCE, Cornelius Balbus marched deep enough to earn a triumph, and Roman coins have turned up astonishingly far south in later soils. The lesson wasn't that the Sahara was easy, it was that it was a network. In this climate of assertion and reconnaissance, a Roman officer named Septimius Flaccus, our sources garble names, this one likely survived via Ptolemy's second-hand geography, received a brief that blended punishment and mapping, halt raids near Leptis Magna, then understand better what lies beyond. He led a mixed force, legionaries for discipline, auxiliaries for desert sense. The plan would have hinged on oases known to traders, move from water to water, negotiate or fight at Garamantian nodes as needed, and push past where Balbus had gone. The terrain escalates from coastal plains to high desert, to the volcanic starkness of the Tibesti, black cones and dust, the kind of mountains that feel like time ran thin. Cross those and you shift again. Hyper-aridity relaxes. The land begins to hold water. After months, the texts say roughly 3, the expedition stood on a freshwater inland sea, fringed by savanna, reeds and animals whose bodies defined the place. Hippos wallowed. 2-horned rhinoceroses snorted. Elephants might have haunted the margins. Ancient writers later called it the Lake of the Hippopotamus and the Rhinoceros. Nothing in the trans-Saharan corridor fits like Lake Chad, which in antiquity was larger and fed by rivers that Ptolemy's world picture also registers imperfectly, but recognizably. Was Flaccus himself there, or did he dispatch a forward party while holding the main body north of the Tibesti? Ptolemy's account is a distillation of a distillation. He leaned on Marinus of Tyre, whose works we lack, who in turn relied on earlier reports. The chain is fragile, but the convergence of details, the fauna, the far south of the desert, the notion of a large lake, pulls in the same direction. Roman coins in Chad do not prove a garrison, but they do prove connection. At minimum, the army's knowledge expanded, and mapmakers absorbed that expansion. The practical aims were not forgotten. The column fought skirmishes with raiding groups, dispersed threats, and probably negotiated with Garamantian authorities to pass or to avoid a larger clash. Her punitive mission only works if you can return. Flaccus did. No triumph greeted him in Rome, perhaps because of rank, perhaps because the centre's attention hovered elsewhere, perhaps because the achievement was deemed provincial. Yet in provincial terms, it was a complete success. Raids checked, reputations reinforced, and a report of a lake that would structure learned talk of inner Africa for centuries to come. Later, commanders took up the same double brief. Gaius Valerius Festus marched again around 70 CE after fresh Garamantian trouble. Some traditions even mutter about a tiny Roman outpost planted far south. Romance. Likely, but an indicator of how the frontier imagination worked. Punish. Probe. Remember what you learned and pass that memory to men who draw lines and write names on maps. Flaccus's march, if we must add a historian's hedge, probably reached Lake Chad, or at least reached those who could describe it with enough accuracy to fix it in educated minds. The expedition did not redraw the empire's limits. It redrew its knowledge and showed once more that Roman history is not just marble forums and legions on alpine roads. It is also dust in armor hinges, a caravan line under alien constellations, and a file of men standing stunned at a water's edge that seemed to reprove the word desert. The mandate of heaven, how China made legitimacy conditional in the 11th century BCE. The Zhou people who had just overthrown the Shang faced a problem every revolutionary government faces: how to explain themselves as anything other than the strongest thieves. Their answer was not a new god who favored their clan. It was a principle that could outlive them. Tian Ming, the mandate of heaven. There would be one rightful ruler under heaven at a time, they said, but his right was contingent. Heaven, an impersonal moral order, rather than a personal deity, granted favor to a just king and withdrew it from a tyrant. Droughts, floods, eclipses, rebellions, these could be read as warnings, as verdicts. This was politics wrapped in ethics and cosmology. To legitimize their own seizure of power from a Shang court, they painted as cruel and wasteful. The Zhou pointed to omens and calamities as heaven's rebuke. Confucius later venerated the Duke of Zhou as a paragon of sagely statecraft, underwriting Zhou legitimacy in the very canon that would guide Chinese moral thought. The doctrine also made rebellion conceptually possible. Mencius would later say that a ruler who makes the people suffer is no ruler at all. Removing him is not regicide but justice. Success was its own proof. If you win and restore order, heaven must have backed you. So Chinese history acquired a rhythm, the dynastic cycle, that was not just narrative pattern but political pedagogy. A new house rises with vigor, taxes moderately, appoints capable people and performs rituals that bind heaven, earth, and human order. Over time, this is history's gravity. Corruption, faction, and complacency accumulate. Taxes bite harder, public works overreach, court life detaches. Unusual disasters and social unrest are read as Tian's frowns. Their challenger arises, from a border garrison, a great family's branch, a peasant general, and topples the failing house, claiming the mandate anew. The story instructs both ruler and ruled: do justice or you will fall. Endure misrule and you may remove it. Historical cases make the doctrine feel concrete. The Qin unified China in 221 BCE under an emperor whose legalist harshness built walls and roads and resentment. Upon his death, uprisings eroded the state quickly. By 202 BCE, Liu Bang, a man of humble origin, founded the Han and declared the mandate his. The Han made the doctrine part of the operating system. Emperors performed sacrifices to harmonize with heaven. Disasters prompted edicts of self-critique and policy correction. Even when non-Han conquerors such as the Qing took the throne, they spoke in the same key. The Ming fell to rebels. By defeating the rebels and restoring order, the Manchu had heaven's warrant. The mandate differs crucially from Europe's early modern divine right. It is not irrevocable. It functions as a moral audit, not a permanent anointing. It empowered emperors by draping them in cosmic order. It constrained them by threatening to strip that drape if governance failed. It also gave intellectuals a language for dissent that was not mere sedition, remonstrance in court, criticisms in histories, and, at the limit, righteous rebellion. This conditionality did not prevent autocracy. It taught autocrats to justify themselves in ethical terms and to fear the weather's meaning. Was the doctrine a recipe for instability, since it sanctified overthrow? Perhaps it made cycles feel inevitable, where other polities might imagine continuity. But it also supplied a shared script that eased transitions. Each entrant claimed not to be a usurper, but a restorer. Retrospective histories condemned the old and inscribed the new as moral fact. Over more than 2 millennia, from Zhou through Han, Tang, Ming, and Qing, the mandate of heaven did what good political myths do. It explained the world, disciplined the powerful licensed change, and made moral language the medium of statecraft. Even after the imperial system ended in the early 20th century, the habit of reading legitimacy, in terms of performance and public order, lingers like a watermark. The mandate's theology has ebbed. Its logic, that authority rests on results visible to all, still shapes how many in and beyond China talk about the right to rule. From Menes to Pharaoh, how a word became a throne. In the long arc of Egyptian civilization, continuity is the drumbeat, but words, slippery, evolving, reveal subtler revolutions. Consider the very word we now use casually, Pharaoh. In films and books it seems eternal, a title as old as the pyramids themselves. Yet the truth is stranger. Menes, Narmer, Khufu, and even the warrior kings of the New Kingdom would never have recognized Pharaoh as their official title. For the first 1,000 years of Egypt's dynastic story, kings were Nisu or Hem, not Pharaoh, Menes, identified by many with Narmer. The unifier of Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE did something more crucial than coin a word. He created a throne that merged two lands into one crown. The double diadem that said the valley and delta now spoke with one voice. His successors inherited an apparatus that balanced symbolism and bureaucracy, viziers, scribes, priests, nomarchs, all recognizing the king as the human keystone of cosmic order, Ma'at. But when inscriptions name these kings, they list throne names, Horus names, and divine epithets, not Pharaoh. So where did Pharaoh come from? The etymology is architectural, per-aa, the great house. Originally it meant the royal palace itself, a synecdoche like the White House today. Texts from the Old Kingdom use it that way, per-aa as a place, not a person. Over centuries the association deepened. To speak of the great house was to speak of those within it. By the New Kingdom, 16th–11th century BCE, priests and officials used the phrase as respectful circumlocution. The great house commands, the great house decrees. Still, it was a building, not a man. The pivot comes in the late New Kingdom. Around the 22nd dynasty, in the reign of Siamun, 986 and 967 BCE, documents finally attached the per-a directly to the sovereign's name, Pharaoh Siamun. This was the moment when Great House hardened into Pharaoh as a royal title. Why then? Partly linguistic drift, partly political theatre. After centuries of instability at the close of the New Kingdom, with priests and generals contesting authority, a more transcendent label helped reframe kingship as institution rather than individual. To be Pharaoh was to be not just a man, but the palace itself, the eternal seat of rule. For us, this slippage means that we anachronistically call Khufu Pharaoh Khufu, though no contemporary would have. Yet anachronism is not entirely falsehood. The Egyptians themselves retrojected. Later kings styled themselves as heirs of Menes and Khufu, and in that retrojection, the word Pharaoh folded the entire dynastic line into its embrace. What we lose in precision, we gain in resonance. Pharaoh as shorthand for Egypt's kingly mystique across 3 millennia. Language shapes imagination. King is common, Pharaoh is unique. The shift from palace to person illustrates how Egyptians blurred spaces and bodies, architecture and divinity. The ruler was a man, a god's son, and a house. He wore crowns that bound the Nile Valley together. He stood between people and gods as guarantor of Ma'at. And when foreigners, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks came, they too used the word, translating, adapting, perpetuating. By the time the Hebrew Bible told of Pharaoh's hard heart, the term was already a bridge from Egyptian self-conception to outsider memory. Thus, Menes the unifier did not call himself Pharaoh. But without Menes, the word would mean nothing. He forged the double kingdom, whose palace became the great house whose name became the Pharaoh. In that layering, we glimpse how Egypt made continuity not from static symbols but from evolving language. What seems eternal is often invention layered upon invention, a word that started as a building and ended as a throne. The tomb of Imhotep. Searching for Egypt's first genius, of all ancient Egyptians whose names survived outside royal lists, Imhotep shines brightest. Born around 2700 BCE, he rose from common origins to become vizier, high priest, physician, astronomer, and above all architect. Serving Pharaoh Djoser of the Third Dynasty, Imhotep revolutionized stone. Instead of mastabas, the traditional flat-roofed tombs, he envisioned stacked platforms, the step pyramid at Saqqara, the world's first monumental stone building. Its 6 rising tiers still dominate the desert horizon. Imhotep turned perishable mud brick into eternal limestone, changing architecture forever. Centuries after his death, Egyptians elevated him to divine status, rare for a mortal. They worshipped him as a god of wisdom and healing, patron of scribes, later equated with Asclepios by the Greeks. Temples bore his name. Patients invoked him in prayers. Physicians traced their lineage to him. In short, Imhotep became legend. Yet the man's own resting place, the tomb of this genius, remains hidden. Logic suggests he would lie near Djoser's pyramid in Saqqara. Pharaohs often honored their greatest officials with nearby burials. But Saqqara is vast, a necropolis layered with dynasties, priests, and animals. Archaeologists have scoured the sands for more than a century. Walter Emery, a British Egyptologist in the mid-20th century, discovered subterranean galleries filled with millions of mummified ibises and baboons, sacred to Thoth and perhaps linked to Imhotep's cult. Exciting, yes, but not Imhotep himself. Why is the search so difficult? Tomb robbing, shifting sands, later construction, all conspire. Some think his tomb lies beneath Djoser's own pyramid complex, still sealed. Others suspect an undiscovered chamber in the desert plateau to the north. Egyptian authorities in the 21st century have launched radar scans and new digs, hopeful that technology may succeed where trowels have not. Each find, an inscription, a statue fragment, raises hopes only to disappoint. The absence matters. Imhotep's tomb would likely hold texts, tools, perhaps medical papyri that could illuminate not just Egyptian science, but the very origins of systematic medicine. It would contextualize his deification, showing how a man became a god. It would anchor a legend in stone. Until then, Imhotep lives as paradox, the best documented commoner in early Egyptian history, yet without a known grave. Perhaps this is fitting. A man who built eternity's first house of stone may have chosen anonymity for himself. Or perhaps waiting under Saqqara's sands, the tomb still keeps its secret, challenging us to match his genius by finding him. The Saqqara bird, toy symbol, or something stranger. In 1898, excavators at Saqqara unearthed a wooden object just 6 inches long. Carved around the 3rd century BCE, it looked like a stylized bird. Body, tail, wings outstretched. But its wings were straight, not curved like most bird effigies. Its tail was vertical like a rudder. It had no legs. To some eyes it looked less like a bird and more like a glider. Thus began one of archaeology's strangest debates. Was the Saqqara bird evidence of ancient flight? Mainstream scholars urge caution. Most wooden figurines from Egyptian tombs were symbolic, toys or ritual objects. Birds were linked with the soul, which was often depicted as a bird with human head. The Saqqara bird could easily have been placed in a tomb to help the soul fly. Without inscription, context is conjecture. The vertical tail may simply be artistic convention. Yet in the 1960s, aviation enthusiasts took a harder look. The object, they argued, shows real aerodynamic features. Curved wings that could generate lift, a rudder-like tail. When replica models were tested in wind tunnels, they did glide, briefly like a paper airplane. If weighted with a small nose cone, they performed better. Could Egyptian artisans have stumbled upon principles of flight 2 millennia before the Wright brothers? Skeptics reply, gliding toys prove curiosity, not aircraft. Egyptians had kites, boomerangs, and spinning tops. A child's toy can resemble technology without being technology. Moreover, the bird has no horizontal stabilizer, making controlled flight impossible. Without context, one artifact cannot upend history. But fascination persists. The bird is displayed in Cairo's museum, inspiring replicas, documentaries, even conspiracy theories about ancient engineers. For Egyptians, the object's ambiguity may have been its point, a symbol poised between earth and sky, embodying the hope of flight into eternity. Whether toy, ritual, or accident, the Saqqara bird reminds us that humans have always dreamed of flying, and sometimes in wood and whimsy, those dreams take form centuries too early. Necho's II in the Phoenician voyage around Africa. Around 600 BCE, Pharaoh Necho II faced a grand strategic problem. His fleet could not easily link Egypt's Red Sea and Mediterranean interests, since the Suez Canal was centuries away. So he turned to the world's best sailors, the Phoenicians of Tyre and Sidon, now allied with Egypt. His order: sail south from the Red Sea, circumnavigate Africa, and return by way of the Mediterranean. It was an audacious command. Thousands of miles, unknown coasts, uncertain supplies. Herodotus, writing 2 centuries later, preserves the tale. He admits skepticism, but records the core. The Phoenicians sailed south, rounded Africa's southern edge, and after 3 years returned through Gibraltar. Along the way, each autumn they landed, sowed crops, harvested, and resumed. Only thus could ancient ships provision such a journey. When they returned, they reported a detail Herodotus found absurd. At one stage, the sun lay to their right, north of them. Modern readers recognize the truth. Only by crossing the equator would the sun appear north at noon. This single observation strongly suggests they really did round Africa. Could it be done? Experiments say yes. In 2008-2010, a reconstructed Phoenician ship successfully sailed from Syria, down the Red Sea, around the Cape of Good Hope, and back to the Mediterranean, proving such a voyage possible with ancient rigging. The 3-year span fits the agricultural stopovers described. Why then was the feat forgotten? Egypt had little need to repeat it. Regular trade ran through the Red Sea and overland caravans. For Greeks later, the claim seemed implausible. Only in the age of discovery did Europeans retrace the route. If true, the voyage crowns the Phoenicians as masters of the sea, not just in the Mediterranean, but globally. It shows that human horizons are often broader than their records. A pharaoh's whim, sailors' skill, and winds' cooperation may have carried cedar-built ships around Africa 2,000 years before Vasco da Gama. History may have doubted, but the sun's position tells no lies. Nefertiti, queen without a tomb among ancient Egypt's women, few captivate like Nefertiti. Her name means the beautiful one has come, and her bust in Berlin's Neues Museum, painted limestone, serene neck, regal crown, is one of the world's most famous artifacts. She was the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, who in the mid-14th century BCE wrenched Egypt into religious revolution by elevating Aten, the solar disk, above all gods. In Amarna, their capital city, art shows Nefertiti not as consort in shadow, but as partner in rule, smiting enemies, receiving tribute, almost equal in prominence to her husband. Then she vanishes. By year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, inscriptions grow silent. Some scholars think she died suddenly. Others argue she assumed new identity as co-regent under a male name, perhaps even as the mysterious pharaoh Smenkhkare. When Tutankhaten, later Tutankhamun, restored traditional gods, Amarna was abandoned and its revolutionary family erased. In that damnatio memoriae, Nefertiti's fate became one of history's most haunting blanks. The question centers on her burial. No tomb has been identified. Did she lie in Amarna's royal necropolis, looted or destroyed in the backlash? Or was she secretly transferred to the Valley of the Kings, where Egypt's greatest monarchs rest? In 2015, Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves proposed that Tutankhamun's tomb, KV 62, may hide a sealed chamber behind decorated walls. Ground-penetrating radar suggested voids. Speculation soared. Could Nefertiti herself lie there? Later scans contradicted the results and the debate cooled, but the possibility has not died. Meanwhile, mummy candidates abound. 1. KV-21b, an anonymous female with royal DNA links, might be Nefertiti, though degraded remains make confirmation elusive. Another, the younger lady in KV35, proved to be Tutankhamun's mother, thus Akhenaten's consort. But genetic tests suggest she was Nefertiti's contemporary, not Nefertiti herself. The fascination persists because Nefertiti embodies enigma. Unlike Cleopatra, who left political records, Nefertiti is seen mostly through fragments and idealized art. Yet those fragments hint at unusual power, beauty, and charisma. Finding her tomb would not only solve a mystery, but clarify Egypt's most radical period. What grave goods, what texts, what artistry might still lie sealed? Until then, her bust stares out across millennia, ageless, untouchable, silent about where her bones may rest. Roman dodecahedra, the polyhedra of mystery across northern Europe, from Britain to Hungary, archaeologists have unearthed over 100 curious bronze objects, dating to the 2nd–4th centuries CE. Each is a hollow dodecahedron, 12 pentagonal faces with circular holes of varying diameters, knobs at each vertex. Sizes range from 4 to 12 centimeters. They have no inscriptions, no ancient mentions. Rome, meticulous in writing about bath pipes and gladiator armor, never once explains them. Thus a mystery object par excellence. What were they for? Theories multiply. Some suggest candle holders. Indeed, wax traces appear in one specimen. Others think gaming dice, though their irregularity would make play absurd. Still others see astronomical instruments. Hold it up, sight through different holes, measure angles of sun and stars. In the 19th century, one was proposed as a surveying tool for laying out fields or aqueducts. Recently, experimental archaeologists have tried knitting through them, suggesting use as gauges for weaving gloves. Each explanation seems plausible until another specimen contradicts it. Context complicates matters. Many were found in military sites along Rome's northern frontier. Were they soldiers' tools, ritual objects, trade goods? Some bear exquisite craftsmanship, implying elite ownership. Yet their distribution is uneven, unknown in Italy, prolific in Gaul and Germania. That absence from Rome itself deepens the puzzle. Perhaps they were multi-purpose. A candle holder can also be a teaching tool, a status trinket, or an astronomical toy. Ancient societies delighted in hybrid uses, or perhaps they were indeed ritual, tied to local cults. Their geometric perfection and uncanny presence make them natural candidates for symbolic power. What is clear is that Romans of the provinces invested skill in making them and saw value in keeping them. Their very silence in texts may indicate they were too trivial for scholars or too esoteric for outsiders. Today, museums display them as enigmatic treasures, their gleaming edges inviting guesses. In a civilization whose engineering we otherwise know intimately, the dodecahedra remind us how much remains hidden. Rome left aqueducts, roads, laws, and literature, but also puzzles that resist every tidy box. The Phaistos disc, a message in spiral script in 1908. Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier excavated the Minoan palace of Phaistos on Crete. Among storerooms of clay tablets, he found something unique, a fired disc of clay 15 centimeters across, stamped with 241 symbols, arranged in a spiral from rim to center. Each symbol was impressed with a seal, footprints, shields, birds, human heads like movable type. This made the disc the earliest known example of printing. Yet the language it prints is unknown. The disc dates to around 1700 BCE. At that time, Minoan Crete used Linear A script, still undeciphered. The disc's signs resemble none exactly. Scholars have tried to link them to Anatolian languages, Cypriot syllabaries, even proto-alphabets, but consensus is absent. Was it a hymn, a magic spell, a calendar, a game board? Without parallel texts, decipherment is nearly impossible. Every code needs a Rosetta Stone. The disc has none. Speculation abounds. Some think it's a fake, planted by Pernier to outshine Arthur Evans, who had discovered Gnosis. Yet thermoluminescence tests show it is authentically ancient. Others argue it was not Cretan at all, but imported from Anatolia. Whatever its origin, its uniqueness is crippling. One disc, no corpus. What captivates is its artistry. The spiral arrangement suggests performance, words read aloud, a chant uncoiling as the priest or scribe traced inward. The standardized stamps imply a workshop capable of mass production, but no second disc has ever appeared. Perhaps it was an experiment abandoned, or a sacred one-off. The Phaistos disc epitomizes the fragile survival of texts. Thousands of clay tablets endure because they were accidentally fired in palace conflagrations. This disc alone survived by intent. It whispers from a culture that wrote, but whose voice we cannot hear. Until a cache appears, it will remain mute, a message in a script without readers, spinning its spiral forever inward. The Antikythera mechanism, a computer from antiquity, in 1901, sponge divers near the Greek island of Antikythera found a Roman-era shipwreck. Among statues and amphorae lay a corroded lump of bronze, dismissed at first as junk. Decades later, scholars recognized gears embedded within. Radiographs revealed complexity unimagined for its age. More than 30 bronze gears, intermeshing to display astronomical cycles. The Antikythera mechanism, built around 100 BCE, is the world's first known analog computer. Turn a hand crank, and dials on its face track the sun, moon, and 5 planets known to the ancients. One dial predicted eclipses, another counted the 4-year Olympiad cycle. It even accounted for the moon's irregular orbit, with a sophisticated pin and slot mechanism. Nothing comparable appears again until medieval clockwork 1,000 years later. Who built it? Perhaps a workshop linked to Hipparchus of Rhodes, the great astronomer whose lunar theories match the mechanism's precision, or perhaps a follower of Archimedes, who reportedly designed celestial models. Its wreck context, a ship carrying luxury goods from the Aegean toward Rome, suggests it was loot or treasure destined for elite hands. Why did such technology vanish? Bronze was costly and devices delicate. Only a handful may have existed, reserved for savants and kings. When political upheaval and economic decline struck the late Roman world, the tradition of making them may have died, leaving only texts hinting at lost marvels. Cicero described similar machines now vanished. Modern study has advanced with CT scans, reconstructing missing gears and inscriptions. Replicas work. They forecast eclipses, mark calendars, embody mathematical theory in metal. The mechanism proves ancient science was not merely theoretical, but mechanical. It forces us to rethink what Greeks could build and how much has been lost. It also humbles us. For centuries, Western history told itself that progress is linear. The Antikythera mechanism says otherwise. Knowledge can flower and vanish. Brilliance can corrode in the sea. Only chance. Divers chasing sponges in 1901 delivered it back. Today, in a museum in Athens behind glass, the fragments gleam like a secret whispered across time. We were more advanced than you think. Rongorongo, the silent script of Easter Island, on a remote volcanic island in the Pacific, thousands of miles from any continent. The Rapa Nui people carved towering stone moai that watch eternally toward the horizon. Yet as astonishing as the statues are, an even deeper mystery lies on small wooden tablets once kept in their villages, the glyphs of Rongorongo. Discovered by Europeans in the 19th century, this script appears to be the only independent writing system ever created in Oceania. And yet, despite more than a century of study, nobody today can read it. The Rongorongo tablets are wooden planks inscribed with neat rows of pictographs, human figures, fishhooks, birds, plants, crescent moons. The lines are written in a peculiar reverse Boustrophodon style, the first line left to right, the second right to left, and so on, with each line rotated 180 degrees. This odd method suggests a standardized formal system, evidence of a genuine script rather than mere doodles. Where did it come from? Polynesian culture traditionally relied on oral tradition, not writing. Yet sometime after the first settlers arrived on Rapa Nui, around the 12th century CE, this innovation emerged. Some scholars propose it developed locally, perhaps influenced by South American contact. Others argue it arose entirely on the island. Unfortunately, the timing of its invention coincided with calamity. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Easter Island suffered waves of disease, slave raids, and cultural collapse. When missionaries arrived in the 1860s, they burned many tablets as pagan relics. Only about 24 survive in museums today. Crucially, the last elders who could interpret the glyphs perished before their knowledge could be preserved. Decipherment attempts have struggled. The script's small corpus, only a few thousand signs, makes statistical analysis difficult. Some argue it is not a full script but proto-writing, a mnemonic for chants or genealogies. Others note repeating patterns that suggest calendrical or religious texts. Intriguingly, one tablet may describe a lunar calendar, linking glyphs to moon phases and agricultural cycles. Rongorongo's silence haunts linguists. If truly a writing system, it would radically alter our understanding of independent invention of literacy, ranking alongside Sumerian cuneiform and Mayan glyphs. But until a bilingual Rosetta Stone emerges, it remains locked. On Easter Island today, Rapa Nui descendants honor the tablets as sacred relics of identity. Their unreadable lines speak both to the brilliance of their ancestors and to the fragility of cultural memory. The moai may endure, but the voices of the glyphs remain hushed, a script that waits for someone to listen. Shambhala, the hidden kingdom of the Himalayas high in the mountains, beyond snow-choked passes and unseen by ordinary eyes, legend tells of a kingdom untouched by time. Its name is Shambhala, a place of eternal peace, wisdom, and enlightenment. In Buddhist tradition, it is said to lie somewhere north of India, perhaps in Tibet or Central Asia. Yet for centuries, seekers from lamas to adventurers have tried to find it, and none have returned with proof. Shambhala first appears in the Kalachakra Tantra, a Tibetan Buddhist text from around the 10th century CE. It describes a kingdom ruled by enlightened monarchs, where all inhabitants are free from suffering, devoted to compassion, and skilled in advanced spiritual practice. In this vision, Shambhala is not merely a paradise but a hidden stronghold of Dharma, preserved for the moment when the world declines into chaos. At that time, prophecy declares, Shambhala's kings will ride forth with a great army to defeat ignorance and restore balance. But is Shambhala a real place or a spiritual metaphor? Tibetan lamas teach that the journey to Shambhala is primarily inward, a metaphor for enlightenment, reached through meditation and discipline. Yet travelers throughout history have sought it on the map. Medieval Indian texts place it beyond the Himalayas. Mongol legends link it to a northern land of hidden rulers. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Western explorers, from Russian mystic Nicholas Roerich to theosophists, chased rumors of a valley sealed by snow, where an advanced civilization flourished. Some modern scholars suggest Shambhala reflects memories of ancient Central Asian kingdoms, oasis cultures in the Tarim Basin or the lost realm of Jangjung near Mount Kailash. Archaeology in these regions reveals once flourishing societies that indeed vanished, leaving behind myths of hidden survival. Yet, Shambhala's enduring power lies less in geography than in imagination. It is Shangri-La before the word existed, a symbol of hope that somewhere a better world persists. During the Cold War, conspiracy theorists even claimed secret bases in the Himalayas might hide remnants of Shambhala, mixing spirituality with espionage fantasies. Today, Shambhala remains central to Tibetan Buddhist practice. Initiates of the Kalachakra ritual are told that by visualizing Shambhala, they prepare for inner transformation. Pilgrims in Nepal and Tibet still whisper of valleys where flowers never fade and teachers live unseen. Whether real or myth, Shambhala endures as one of history's great mysteries, a kingdom that may never have existed in earth and stone, but which continues to shape the maps of the human soul. Ollantaytambo, the stone giants of the Andes in the sacred valley of Peru, amid terraced hillsides and rushing rivers, stands Ollantaytambo, an Inca fortress and ceremonial center. Today it is a tourist stop en route to Machu Picchu, but its colossal stone walls pose a question that archaeologists still debate. How did the Inca move and fit such massive blocks with precision, using no wheels, no iron, and no written engineering manuals? At Ollantaytambo, the Temple of the Sun features monoliths of pink rhyolite, each weighing up to 50 tons. These stones were quarried nearly 6 kilometers away across a river valley. Somehow the Inca cut them from cliffs, lowered them down slopes, dragged them across the plain, ferried them over the Urubamba River, and hauled them up the steep terrace to the site. All without draft animals larger than llamas. The fitting of the stones is equally baffling. Inca masonry famously joins irregular polygons so tightly that a knife blade cannot slide between them. At Ollantaytambo, the monoliths stand edge to edge with astonishing accuracy. Some joints curve in 3 dimensions. Others incorporate tiny keystone stones to stabilize pressure. This design has resisted earthquakes for centuries. How did they achieve this? Traditional explanations suggest a combination of stone hammers, rope, wooden rollers, and sheer manpower. Experimental archaeology shows it is possible, but the scale remains daunting. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, would have been needed for each block. Oral tradition says workers lubricated stone roads with wet clay or llama fat to reduce friction. Others hypothesize sledges pulled over log rollers. Still, the river crossing is mysterious. No remains of bridges or rafts survive. Legends arose. Locals said giants built Ollantaytambo before the Inca. Alternative theorists imagine lost technologies, from copper saws to even more speculative ideas. Yet archaeologists emphasize Inca genius. What they lacked in iron or wheels, they compensated with social organization, coordination, and intimate knowledge of stone. The fortress itself bears marks of unfinished work. Several massive stones lie abandoned mid-transport on slopes opposite the site, as if construction was suddenly halted, perhaps by the Spanish conquest. These tired stones offer rare glimpses into process, showing how the builders prepared but never completed the journey. Ollantaytambo is not just engineering. It is also sacred landscape. The terraces align with solstice sunrises, and the Temple of the Sun may have been an astronomical observatory. Some stones are carved with niches for ritual offerings, linking the site to worship of Inti, the sun god. Standing before its walls today, one feels both awe and humility. The stones do not give up their secrets easily. Like the pyramids of Giza or the statues of Easter Island, Ollantaytambo embodies human ingenuity stretched to its limits. Whether solved by archaeology or forever left to wonder, its mystery endures in the Andean highlands, a city of giants built by a people who never saw themselves as small.